Hey, yo, everybody, welcome back. Episode 2 coming at you. Episode 1 I thought it went really well. I got a little feedback afterwards. Looked like a good kickoff. The material seems relevant. I think one of my favorite comments was like, this sounds very familiar to the issues we are facing when designing our enterprise apps. That's right where this is trying to land. This is trying to land in actually building, your application and actually, building a production system that's going to be working. So, we've covered, a lot of the details on in other episodes and like the whole first seasons. And guess who's cooking burgers? Oh, awesome. It is cold and wet here. I am not even going to go stand by the grill. It's just not worth it. I will figure something else out for lunch. But yeah, fortunately, I mean, New Year's Day, at least in the US, it seems like everything is open. It isn't like Christmas where everything was closed, and rightfully so, it should have been. But and New Year's Day is just kind of like, hey, everything's still open, everybody's hanging out, so that's always good. Um, so this season is really about building a real app, thinking about how we want to architect our application so that it can answer all the ilities. It's going to be reliable. It's going to be you know available, things like that. Another aspect that I really wanted to kind of hit on is, moving away from this kind of request response mentality and, seeing how we can build a larger system with just the simple patterns of exchanging messages, and take decoupling to that next level. Um, yeah, so the context or subtext that we're using is around the fast food restaurant, something that we've very graciously stole from Jimmy Bogart. I texted Jimmy last night, and obviously his responses were a little delayed because it was New Year's Eve, but I was just like, hey, I'm going to use your video for some stuff. And he was like, cool, that sounds great. So it was all good. Um, I think there was an exchanging of who had the better brand of Prosecco at the time. So, good to know that, there's at least a shared celebration of Prosecco. I think it was even trending on Twitter at like number 23. So clearly Prosecco was the drink of the year, either that or bourbon. I think we drank bourbon all year. Prosecco was like, this year is out. So anyway, I want to jump into this. I wanted to jump back to this diagram here because I want to kind of set us up for the conversation of where we're moving to next. So when we think about request response in mass transit, we're really just talking about two message delays. We're sending a message into a queue, and then we're waiting for another message to get received from the queue. So the only way that that's tied together with a request response is because we've hinted in the headers that the response address is where your next message should be sent. It's really an ABC conversation. Client sends A, B does something with it and produces C, and in the way that that C is produced, it says, oh, and by the way, I have a hint of where I should send it, so instead of publishing the event, I'm just going to send it back to A, and A is going to be able to process it. And that's something that we need to keep in mind as we look at this next capability within mass transit and how we're going to build some reliability. I wanted to do a tiny bit of housekeeping first in the code because you'll notice a difference between episode 1 and 2. I took out the service instance and the service client because I felt like all those other exchanges were confusing things. And when I jump into the next part, I didn't want an explosion of exchanges. So I took out the conductor service client because we were publishing the request anyway, so I think something with the registration on the container is broken. And it wasn't using the service client. So I cleaned that out of the code and I deleted all those exchanges. So we should have a little bit of cleaner RabbitMQ space because I'm really going to explore how that fits together as we go into the next step, because understanding how your broker is running is really useful when you're trying to manage your applications in production. So I just wanted to drop that out there. Hopefully it's I don't want to like stealth change the code and then like have people say, hey, what happened? Especially since I called it out and it didn't work. So anyway, mass transit has a capability in it called Courier. And Courier, from a terminology within mass transit, is it's a routing slip implementation. And the routing slip pattern is covered. I think Jimmy even calls it out in his video. This is a capability that's been in mass transit since, I want to say 2013. I mean, we built a pretty extensive system heavily around Courier routing slips. It's been integrated with mass transit since version 3, but it was a separate package before that for mass transit 2. And what this does is initially when sagas came out, there was a Cornell paper that was written, and I believe it's written in the documentation here somewhere. I might even call it out. Compensations. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's in here. We had the original, well, I guess it's a Princeton paper. No, but it says Cornell here. I don't know. Whatever. It was written at Princeton, but it's hosted on Cornell's server, so I don't even know how that all works. But this talks about long-lived transactions and the real conversation of what is the true definition of a saga. Well, sagas in mass transit, I think, match more towards process managers because they're managing state and they're doing it kind of in a centralized way. Whereas the routing slip implementation, Courier, is really meant around building those distributed transactions. And when we talked in the last episode about getting a hamburger ready in our fast food restaurant involves two participants. We have to grill the burger, and then we take that grilled burger, we chuck it over to the guy at the dressing station, and he puts the lettuce, tomato, pickles, onions, ketchup, mustard, all the good stuff in it, jalapenos, grilled onions, let's just make it absolutely decadent, So what we have with our existing sample is just a simple consumer that accepts the submit order as part of a request response. But we need to burst that out. And bursting is a term that, when I think about a distributed system that has a lot of participants, bursting and bundling, AKA fork and join, are really key concepts that we have to understand. And we're going to cover forking later on. Like, I think we get to forking around episode 4 or 5 based on the timeline I've put together. Because I really kind of want to focus on what it is that we're trying to put together and how so we're going to start in the small with the grill and the dressing station because they're sequential. You got to grill the burger and then you dress it. I realized that you could get the dressing ready and maybe we'll add that in like episode 7-ish. I'm really trying to predict the future, but let's just say we're making it up as we go. But for now, we're just going to say it's a sequential process. We're going to grill the burger and then we're going to dress it and then we're going to deliver it. And that's a sequential process that we want to manage, and it has dependencies between them. But really, the person dressing the burger doesn't care how it's grilled. They could be microwaving a cold burger from yesterday and not know the difference. And if you've probably been at some restaurants, you'd think that's what they do. But it doesn't matter. They have an accepted input, a burger patty, and they output a delicious, television commercial-ready burger that we all get when we, go to a fast food restaurant. In reality, it's a smashed piece of crap that we're surprised we can actually eat, but whatever. So I'm going to talk about Courier. And Courier has a number of concepts. What's written in the docs is decent, but I think it kind of falls short of actually seeing how it is built. And you can build samples all day long, but until you kind of go through the thought process of how you build it, that's one huge piece of feedback I've received on the video series is, it isn't just the how, but it's the why, because the context of why we're doing it really matters. And you're going to hit that context when you're building a large application. You're going to be like, here's a problem I need to solve. Which hammer do I pull out of the toolbox to address it? So Courier is a routing slip implementation. And a routing slip, you can think about it like the little pink sheet that used to be on a piece of paper where it said, route to, Mary, Sam, Frank, and Joe. And, typically that's in order and there's check boxes and it's, kind of gets back down and, Mary handles it and then Sam handles it. And then it gets to Joe and Joe says, hey, Mary, you forgot to sign off on XY. So Joe throws it back to Mary. Mary does the work and then throws it back to Joe. And everybody kind of completes their work. And then eventually it gets done. And when we think about distributed transactions without a database, that's really what we're talking about is we have to execute some activities and we're going to proceed through a series of activities. If one of those activities fails, we need to go back and look through and compensate any activities that may have had side effects or caused change. The typical example is the trip booker is, I booked the flight, I booked the hotel, no rental car available. Okay, well, let's roll back the hotel and roll back the hotel or the airport, the airfare. So those are, pretty common use cases, easy examples to think about. Theater tickets, dinner tickets, oh, we can't get transportation, so let's roll it back. We aren't going to focus on the compensation aspect yet. Right now, we're really just going to focus on coordinating the execution. Because if you remember from the state diagram, or the sequence diagram, Request response is really just sending two messages, sending a request and then sending a directed output of that request to a response address that we had. So the first episode I didn't do a whole lot of coding live because honestly, we've all seen a request client set up in previous episodes, and I felt like it was kind of boilerplate at that point, and I didn't want to go through all that again. But I am going to go through the Courier setup fresh because I want to kind of show how that comes into mindset. So let's get started. So we have the solution that we have here. I'm keeping everything in one project for now. We'll break it out as we go through the season. But for now, I have a consumers folder. I'm going to go ahead and create a new directory for the activities. And these are the routing slip activities that we're going to create and host within our service. And so I'm going to create a directory for each activity because I feel like mentally that's how I want to kind of split it up since they are fairly isolated. And I'm going to call this the grill burger activity because we're going to grill the burger. It's going to happen. And I called it grill burger activity. I probably should have called it just grill burger. Because within here, I'm going to create the actual activity class. And so we're going to call this the grill burger activity. And grill burger activity is going to implement from activity. And right now, we're just going to focus on the execution. So we're going to say it's an execute activity. And the arguments, we're just going to call these the grill burger arguments. And burger, yeah, no, not going there. So we're going to have the grill burger arguments. We're going to make this an interface because, again, I love interfaces. It's just kind of who I am. And we are going to, by implementing iExecute activity, we are going to get an execute method with an execute context. So unlike a consumer that has a consume method, an activity has an execute method. Now, if this was a full-on activity, and let me just kind of pop into that, and I created a log for this, and I said this was a full activity, I would get one more method called compensate. Now, like I said, we aren't going to go deep into compensation at this point, but if this activity had executed in the routing slip, and then failures happened down the line, this compensate method would be called with the log that we passed from the execute method. But I'm going to undo that because I don't really want to go into that right yet. We're just going to focus on the execution. And for now, we're going to put some dependencies in here. Let's see, what else do we need? Probably helps to have a logger of the GBA. So we'll put a logger in there. One of the questions in the chat is, can arguments be made into a record? Probably not. I'm going to say no, but I don't know for sure. They might or they might not. I've never tried, and I'm not going to today because the arguments are mapped through the serializer kind of crazy. So I don't know. There's a lot of munging in the routing slip because the database article that we shared in the previous episode about using the network as state, the routing slip, that sheet of paper, we're making notes on it, we're writing things down, we're adding variables to it. We're using that kind of as our scratch pad for our transaction. So normally, when you have a transaction, is you have participants start committing state, and then they take that state and they come to an agreement at the end that we all agree that this is the current state that it should be, and they commit that. Well, with a distributed transaction across all of these nodes, we're passing that state along in the routing slip. So we do some munging under the covers to pass that state around and map variables to properties. I don't know if it'll work with records or not. I'm going to avoid that for now, but that's a good to-do kind of try thing that somebody might want to look at. So I don't know. So for now, we're going to take a logger, and we're going to make grill burger pretty easy. What are our arguments? Well, let's see. What do we want? I don't know. We want our weight. Are we getting a quarter pounder, or are we getting whatever? Let's get a cheese bouillon on there, because do they want the cheese grilled on? Because you want the hot cheese. You want the doneness. I'd say let's just do a 0 to 100 for doneness. Because we know some computer's going to robotically put this burger on a grill and measure the temperature with a infrared probe or something. We'll call it temperature. I like temperature. That's a great one. So we'll do weight, temperature, and whether or not it has cheese. That's about as far as we're going to go. That's all the grill guys got to worry about. I mean, technically the grilled onions would probably go on here, but this isn't in and out. We're not doing grilled onions. I'm going to leave those in the same file for now, just so we can kind of think about them. And I'm going to do absolutely nothing with them. I am going to say something like log debug, grilling burger, burger. I'm going to do grilling burger, and I'm going to put the weight on here. I'm going to do something like weight, and I'm going to say context.arguments.weight. I'm going to say grilling the burger. We don't need to know the units for weight. We'll assume that this is the US and it's going to be in pounds instead of kilograms. Yeah, great, awesome. I don't even know how to do it. Is it like F:2? Do you even get formatters in log? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to worry about it. So when we typically, with a consumer in MassTransit, the only exits from a consumer method are I can throw an exception, which triggers a fault in the pipeline, or I can respond with messages, or I can just complete successfully, and then the message completes. With an activity, it's a little different. So with an activity, we actually need to tell it that we're done. So you can see that this task is of an execution result. So in this case, I'm going to return context dot completed, and that's it. I think I need to tell it to make this async though. I don't have any awaits right now, but let's say it takes a second to cook a burger. We'll just do like 10 seconds. That's 100 seconds. That sucks. Great, so now we don't get that nice little warning about not using an await. And all we're going to do is we're going to grill the burger. Let's focus on just that for now. So we're going to need another activity very similar to this, and we're going to call this the dress burger activity. And dress burger is going to, we're just going to take grill, change that to dress. Great, we just created more work. But the arguments for dress burger are a little different. We don't care about the weight, temperature, or cheese. What we care about is the good stuff. And I mean, you know, we can do what we want. We'll just put a couple Booleans here. It's like, do you want lettuce? Do you want pickles? Do you want ketchup? So on and so forth. And typically these would probably be decimals too, because you want heavy ketchup, light ketchup. You know, some machine is going to generate this thing eventually. We're going to call this, we're going to say dress in our burger. We're just going to put the ketchup Boolean out there because we really don't care. We can come up with more complex data structures with this offline. We're really just showing us how we put it together. It doesn't take nearly as long to grill or to dress the burger, so we're only going to wait a second. And in fact, I'm going to take the 10 seconds down to like 5 because, you know, you don't need to just have dead air time. So we've created 2 activities, and I need to fix the directory of this one because it's in the dress burger namespace. And this is just a very bare bones activity. It gets arguments, which is very similar to a message type. In fact, you could say that they're essentially the same thing if you really wanted to. And if you wanted to, you could create a business component that would actually do the work using that input argument, but then the outputs become tricky to juggle around because routing slips can have arguments. And I think one of the things that I'm going to go into once I wire this is these activities have a dependency on each other. The dress burger activity needs the burger as an input. And so if I go down to the arguments, I am going to put the burger patty, I'm just going to say the burger patty, sure, great, is one of the inputs. And we're going to create a type for that. And we will make it we'll leave it a class, why not, sure. So we're going to have a burger patty. And that burger patty is just a thing. We don't care what it is. It's a burger patty. A robot would probably call it pet with a patty ID. I don't know, maybe not. But it's just an empty class, but we need the patty. This could be like the Krusty Krab if you really think about it, but we've gone with fork joint, so it's all good. And who eats a burger with a fork, really? Well, actually, I know a lot of people that do, but that's really a side point. And that's a quirk of their own that they need to figure out. But our address burger arguments, burger patty is one of the inputs. We'll get more to that later. I'm going to let that simmer for a little bit. Simmer. Yeah, I didn't even think of that, but yeah. I could do this all day, but I won't because that would just be rude. So let's go back to our submit order consumer now, because remember, we submitted an order had a burger in it, and we're not going to go into fleshing out the order model because honestly, that's like menu and everything else, and I have no energy for that right now. But I want to talk about how we're going to fan this out to the routing slip to do this request. So this submit order consumer needs to tell the routing slip to go off and execute. So what we're going to do is we're going to create the routing slip, and I'm going to put this in a separate method. Create routing slip. And we'll see what input arguments we need for that as we go along. Great, awesome. So to create a routing slip, we start with a builder. We create a new routing slip builder. And that builder gets a tracking number. So every routing slip that executes in the system gets a unique GUID tracking number. So we're just going to assign one so that we have it. Because we may use that, we're going to keep track of it because obviously that's our handle to our future. Much like a request ID in a request, the routing slip tracking number keeps track of the overall transaction and any events and things that are produced are going to include that tracking number. Now we need to add the activities to that routing slip. And I'm doing this within the submit order consumer because what I'm going to essentially create is I'm going to send the order in, and then this consumer is going to execute the routing slip. And when the routing slip is completed, we're going to complete the request. And we're going to look at how we can do that. And hopefully it'll work. So I think it might be fun. And so I'm creating this routing slip with just a new tracking number. And I think one of the first questions that kind of comes to my mind is, why wouldn't I use the order ID for the tracking number? I can think of a couple of reasons why you would not do that. And the first one I can think of is, what if you have to try it more than once? You now have two routing slips that are trying to execute with the same tracking number, and you won't be able to keep track of those events. So you need to decouple the identifiers of things like orders from the transaction identifiers, which is what a tracking number really is, that are trying to execute those transactions. So don't reuse them, because if you have to execute a routing slip twice, it should not have the same tracking number. And that's kind of key of any piece of infrastructure is you don't want to reuse identifiers if there's going to be a one-to-many relationship. So the first activity that I'm going to create is the grill burger item. So I'm going to say builder.addActivity. And the first thing that you're going to see is there are no types in here. So building a routing slip currently, I mean, it's not going to change, but I don't have any coupling to the type of the activity. Because MassTransit does not enforce that. I don't have to have a reference to the interface type of the activity to execute it. I am just passing it information. And that decoupling was significant because we didn't want to say that activities had to be closely coupled to the people trying to execute transactions. We just wanted to provide the information regardless of where it comes from and use that to complete the transactions. Now, shift back over to my brain a little bit and say, here I am trying to build an enterprise application. And what we're going to find is in subsequent episodes, we're going to put a little rigor around this to be able to build these from the type definitions that we have to ensure some completeness. But just for now, we're going to trust that we just pass the information that we have by looking at a reference doc or something like that. I see heads exploding. It's all good. We're going to be fine. So I'm going to add an activity, and I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to call this Grill Burger. It does not matter what I put here. It's for my own use because, again, there is no coupling to the type. Now I need an execute address, and this is where some sort of discovery has to happen. I need to know where that activity is executing. So because I know I'm using configure endpoints, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I am going to say, for my address of this endpoint, I am going to say, you're gonna hate this. You're gonna be like screaming. But I'm gonna go to my kebab case endpoint name formatter that I know I'm using, which I shouldn't do. Actually, I'm gonna use my I endpoint name formatter as a dependency. Yeah, we're gonna extract this into a class that we reuse elsewhere later. But for now, we're gonna pull this formatter in since we know it's there in the container. And we are going to say, because we know the activity is there, so we're going to create in our code some of this coupling. We're going to say the grill burger activity address or something equals formatter dot execute activity, and we know it's the grill burger activity. What did I do wrong? What are you telling me? What am I missing? Incorrect number of parameters. Oh, I have to pass the arguments too. The grill burger arguments. Okay, so that's going to let me get the queue name for that. Let's just call this grill queue name. Great. Here we're going to come in and we're going to say new URI $q grill queue name. So there's our execute address for the, actually we'll just call that grill execute. Yeah, grill queue name, whatever. That's the queue that we're going to send the grill burger command to. And now we're going to pass the arguments to that like we do with a message initializer. So if I look at the grill burger arguments, I know I need weight, temperature, and cheese. Great, awesome. So we're going to say weight equals 0.5. We're going to do a half pounder because this is America. We're going to do temperature equals, let's just do 165. Great. 0.0. I think that's great. I think that's where you're supposed to cook it to. I really have no recollection of the actual number. And we aren't gonna cut any cheese in here. We're just gonna leave it out. We're not gonna have cheese today. So it should default to false. So that's our grill burger activity. And what we've done with our routing slip builder is we're creating an itinerary of the activities that are gonna run. These are going to run in order. So I'm gonna get ordered execution. And I'm specifying the inputs that I know about, the data that I have to pass to that activity. We're going to do one more of these because obviously we want to dress the burger. So we're going to call this the dress queue name. We're going to change this to dress. I'm going to ask for the namespace import. And like I said, we're going to have to decouple this at some point. We're going to figure out how to do that and make it kind of enterprisey so that we can manage it within our configuration management and things like that. These aren't things MassTransit provides because everybody's going to have an opinion. They're going to use a different configuration method. They're going to use a different naming syntax. You know, whatever they're going to do, they're going to do it differently. And so MassTransit isn't going to enforce this on them. So I have the dress queue name. I'm going to come here. I'm going to do the dress. I'm going to dress the burger. I'm going to look at my dress burger arguments, which looks like lettuce, pickles, ketchup. I'm not going to worry about the patty because I don't have the patty. That's information that I don't have. And that's one of the reasons that we're decoupled is because if I was a programmer, I would say, oh, well, I don't have a patty. How do I get a patty? I can't complete the arguments that are needed for this activity. And then I would freak out and everything would go in the end. I'm going to be honest. I like ketchup. I like lettuce. Not on tacos, but definitely sometimes on tacos, not on burritos. But anyway. I'm just going to say I want lettuce and ketchup. Great. Awesome. I'm going to bring these in a little together, just kind of clean it up a bit. And then I'm going to return builder.build. Now, I still need the order ID in here. I want to have some information that's useful, that's kind of general across the board. It isn't specific to an activity. And in fact, the activities might need this information too. And so I want to provide things that I know. So I'm going to add some variables to the routing slip. Variables are part of a shared working space that's type-based and kind of works that way. I'm going to say builder.add variable. And this has a key and a value. And what's interesting is the key actually has meaning. So let's say if I call it name of I think it's, so let's get my message in here, submit order. Get my submit order message. I want to get name of submit order.order ID just because hard-coded strings, we're trying to not be bad. But honestly, we probably should hard-code it because it's our order ID. But yeah, anyway, whatever. Oh, that's one thing I don't like. I mean, I like it, but I don't like it. I'm going to call it order ID. And the reason I'm going to add that is because I'd like to know the order ID, and I'm sure that some of these activities might as well. But I don't need to tell it to them all the time because they might not want it. But if they want it, it's there. It's a variable. And the way the routing slip works is when the activity runs and it looks for the arguments, it first looks here. So arguments that I've specified explicitly to that activity are used first to resolve those properties. Then for the properties that haven't been resolved, it says, oh, let me go look at the variables within the routing slip to see if I can satisfy those properties there. And it will look by name and by type and say, oh, I have a GUID called order ID. There's a GUID called order ID in the variables. I'm going to use that to satisfy the property of the arguments. So if I went to grill burger arguments and added, just so we know who it's for, we added the order ID, I would now get that. And the same thing with the dress arguments. I would get that as well, just by way of adding it on there and the fact that it's a variable on the routing slip. So that's that working space that I can keep data in. Now if I go into my logs, I can say grilling burger. I can put the order ID in here because I have it. And I can say context.arguments.order ID because it's there. I'll do the same thing for the dress burger activity. I'm going to add that order ID so that I can tie that back to the particular item that's being put together. Okay. So now I've added that ordered ID in, and my routing slip builder has built that in there within my submit order consumer. So now I'm going to add this in here. I'm going to say, okay, well, I received my order submission. I'm going to create my routing slip equals create routing slip context.message. Now I'm going to execute it. So I think it's just context.execute routing slip. I have to await it, obviously, because it's going to do some sort of message delivery operation somewhere. And it's interesting because if I actually look at the code of execute, if I create an empty routing slip, it completes right away. It's really kind of funny. But if I have activities on it, it looks at the itinerary, pulls the address, the execute address of that first item in the itinerary out, and sends the message to that activity. And we're going to see that as we kind of step through this. So everything looks green. I need to go to my startup and tell it to register those activities. I'm going to create a marker class in here. I'm just going to call it a struct called routing slip activities. Or let's just call it courier activities. Let's give it a nice name. And really this is just a landing point. I'm not going to do anything with it. Except the one thing I'm going to do with it is I'm going to say add activities from namespace containing courier activities. And I'm doing that because I put my activities in their own namespaces. So if I did add from namespace containing dress burger, yeah, basically that would be pretty lame. So that should add my activities and set them up. I want to run this now, and then we're going to go look at the broker and see how this gets configured. So assuming it works, we'll build it out. I think I still have RabbitMQ running. I do. Build completed. Let's go run. We're going to look at our RabbitMQ endpoint. And we're going to watch and see which queues start showing up. Oh, and of course, Swagger comes in and interrupts me. So what do we have? We have two new queues, one called dressburger_execute and one called grillburger_execute. Never mind the fact that I'm going to fix this in a second with the endpoint name formatter, but the underscore in the kebab case drives me nuts. But it's one of those things that MassTransit did things a certain way with execute endpoints, and if you change them and break people in production, they get really mad when they upgrade versions of MassTransit. So it's why these things are customizable. I'm not enforcing anything. I'm just following what I originally did because the defaults are there. Anyway, So exchanges haven't really changed. You'll notice submit order, burger, execute. You don't see a routing slip exchange. There's no type there because while the execute activity endpoints handle that message, they don't really show it. Yeah. So let's put some run in here. We have the code running. I'm going to set a few breakpoints because I want you to see how this runs as we go along. So I'm going to set a breakpoint here. I'm going to set a breakpoint in the grill burger activity. And I am going to set a breakpoint, and hopefully we won't kill RabbitMQ when we do this. Of course, it's durable messaging. It'll just come right back up and work. We're going to set a breakpoint here as well, and probably down in here. We're just going to set breakpoints all over the place. It's going to be awesome. So let's go and submit an actual order to our regular request client consumer. Did I click? Okay. Boom. All right. So the first thing we do is we land in our consumer. Order submission received. Now we're going to create that routing slip. We're going to create a new ID for the builder so we can see it's just our routing slip builder. We're going to add a variable for that order ID. We're going to get our grill queue name, which turns out to be, hey, grillburger_execute. Awesome. We used our endpoint name formatter that was already in the container. We'll abstract that out later. We're going to add this activity. Is it going to work? Yes, it did. Oh, because it had to do an initializer. There was an async call there. Is add activity async? I can't remember. Maybe not. No, subscribe is. Then I have to add the dress queue, which is going to be dress burger execute. I'm going to add my ketchup and lettuce. I'm going to build that routing slip. I now have a routing slip variable, which is of type routing slip, or routing slip info under the covers, but we don't care. Inside the routing slip, pretty simple data here. Once Ryder catches up and figures it out. It has the log, exceptions, itinerary. Itinerary has 2 items in it. The itineraries have grill burger and dress burger, so all they're in the itinerary. I'm now going to call execute. So execute is just going to send that out into the queue for that first item, and you'll notice I've landed at the grill burger activity. The grill burger activity, we're going to do grilling burger. We can see that order ID is in there. It pulled it from the variables. Weight is there, 0.5. So we're going to grill that burger. We're going to wait 5 seconds because apparently that's as long as it takes to irradiate a burger. Now you can see that we've landed in the dress burger activity. And this is where we're going to show something that we haven't quite handled yet. And we aren't checking it yet, so it isn't a big deal, but we need to handle it at some point. Again, same order ID. Ketchup flag is true. We're going to process this out. And so we've executed 2 activities in a row. The consumer never got back involved. When the grill burger activity completed, it looked at the itinerary and said, oh, the next activity in the chain is the dress burger activity. So it sends it directly to the dress burger activity. There is no central coordinator or controller or saga or any apparatus dealing with that choreography, orchestration, whatever. It's doing it node to node because all of these endpoints know how to behave in a routing slip transaction. So they talk to each other without going back to a central controller. So those are one less message delay per activity that you save by not having a centralized controller. Awesome. So if we go out and look at the log, you can see that we sent some events as well, and we're going to cover those eventually. But you can see that we produced some events. We sent to grill burger execute. It's sent to dress burger. We produced some routing slip activity completed events, some routing slip completed events. All of these different events are produced by routing slips when they run, and all of that can be customized. If you just always had just a generic routing slip activity completed event that went to everybody whenever a routing slip happened, you would just overwhelm your system with information. So MassTransit allows complete customization of all the events that are produced by a routing slip, so you can tailor them to your environment. And I'll cover that again in subsequent episodes as we kind of talk about that. But for now, when we look in the log, we see that we grilled a burger, we dressed a burger, and it was all good. Now, the one thing I want to go over next, and we're just going to kill this app. We'll go look here, and we can see that I got my order ID back. The piece I want to cover next is the burger patty. The burger patty that we've created, we haven't created it. So if we run this again, if we'd looked at it, we would have seen that that burger patty is null. And I'm going to run it again to show that it's null. I'm going to clear my other breakpoints because I don't care about grilling. I don't care about the consumer at this point. I just want to see what happens when I get to dressing the burger. So that, hey, wait a minute, that completed. So that was one other thing I wanted to point out, but I'm going to jump over to the debugger. So if I look at the context.arguments, and I look at the dress burger arguments, ketchup is true, lettuce is true, patty is null. There is no patty. Somehow we have to get the patty into that namespace so that we can actually get the patty to dress the burger. So I'm going to cover that in a second. The other piece I want to cover is that the request client already completed. So if we go back to our submit order consumer, execute does not wait for the routing slip to complete. It just tells it to execute. So in the episode following this one, I'm going to show how we can actually track that and make that participate in the request. But I've already kind of hinted in the conversation about the events produced that as routing slips execute, they produce events, and some of those events include routing slip completed or routing slip faulted, which, what is a request? It's sending a message and then acting on a message in response to that. So that, that's going to be episode 3, where I kind of go into how we can manage that state of that routing slip and bring that back to where it gets sent to the originator. So that's going to be in episode 3. Definitely hold on for that because that's going to be awesome. But now I want to go back to the grill burger activity because this thing is supposed to have some output. It can't just complete. It needs to have some output because dress burger needs input. And input has a cool meaning in Cyberpunk 2077, by the way, but we're not going to go into that. But the language and words and the dialect in Cyberpunk is pretty awesome. There, I mentioned Cyberpunk in an episode. Awesome. Again, I haven't played it as much lately because I've been working on MassTransit. So everybody who consumes MassTransit, you can be happy I'm not just gaming, because I seriously disappeared for a week when that thing came out. I even took time off work to play it, which is pretty, it's either pathetic or cool, depending on whether or not you're a gamer. Anyway, back to grilling the burger. So I want to grill a burger. I'm going to create my burger patty. New burger patty. All right, I have a new burger patty. And where is the burger patty? That's in a weird namespace. I think from a company perspective, I want to move that somewhere else. I think I want to make burger patty one of my business important things. So I'm going to put that over in contracts. And we're just going to call that good, because that's something that I want to make fairly ubiquitous as part of my domain. So I'm going to put burger patty over in my contracts. And now Grill Burger doesn't know anything about dressing a burger. It just knows that it produces a patty, and I'm going to complete the routing slip. Can it be a record? Sure, it can be a record. We'll make it a record. We'll put the needle on the record so the drum beat goes like this. All right. Yeah, under the covers, a record is a class, so it's treated the same way. It's just it's immutable by default by the language standards. So we'll put as, do we want to give the patty an identifier? Do we have inventory tracking down to the quarter pound level? I don't know. We'll get there eventually. I just don't think we need to get there yet. So we're going to create a patty, and then we are going to complete it, but with variables. Hey, we got variables here. And those variables are just going to be things that I can new up in here. So I'm going to say patty equals patty. I'm going to put that patty in with the thing. And I don't think these are case sensitive, so you can literally just drop the patty in there. I don't think you have to worry about casing. So I'm going to complete that with variables. And what that's going to say is, as this activity completes, drop a new variable in the workspace of type burger patty named patty. Now it's type and name that matter, because that's going to match up to the argument names that are the inputs of the other activity. Yeah, so great. Now if I go back to the dress burger activity, and I still have the breakpoint set there, so let's fire this up again, close the dozens of extra windows I have here, because you know it's going to create another one. I swear, F5 debugging with this, you get browser tab central. I'm going to try it out. I'm going to hit execute. This will come back right away because my activities are queuing up. They're running in the routing slip in the other process. I'll eventually hit that breakpoint. And now if I look at my arguments, there's my patty, and that's my burger patty, because it pulled that out of the variables out of the routing slip and now populated that property so I can cook the patty. Awesome. We're sharing data between activities without actually tightly coupling to them. Now we are sharing the contract because, again, it's by type and by name, but that's cool. Nobody cares. It should be fine. Because it's actually at the message level, it isn't really a type. It just has the message type name. It just tries to deserialize it into that type. And that's why I say that they're typically, the arguments are interfaces. I've never tried to make them a record, but they might or might not work. They should. They're the same. So it uses the same message initializer under the hood as using new arguments. Yeah. So we're going to hit go here. We're going to let it run. Hopefully my connection to RabbitMQ didn't die. It's been pretty good about not doing that lately. Yeah, and if I go look at my console log, I can see that my routing slip completed, the activity completed, everything was great. The timestamps, I sat in the debugger for about a minute and jabbered on, so it's all good. Dressed the burger with ketchup. So that's taking and going from a consumer to where I now have two activities that are executing sequentially, they're tracking state, and that they can be compensated. What time are we in? We're at 45 minutes. It's a little longer than I like to go for these kind of things, but I think I'm going to I think I might as well do, no, I'm not going to do compensation because then I got to generate faults and everything. So I'll save that for a subsequent episode. But suffice it to say, we now have two activities that run and are executing in sequential to grill the burger and dress the burger. And we're initiating that from our submit order consumer. So in the next episode, we're going to tie that together with the events and subscriptions from Courier to make it all part of that original request so that we grill the burger, we dress the burger, and then we complete that request when all of that stuff is done. Now we're doing that more for visual representation. I don't think you would obviously do that because an enterprise process may take days to complete. So you certainly wouldn't want to have a request client waiting on it. But again, remember, a request is a message sent and a message received. They don't have to be done through the request client. They can be originated through anything. It's just a promise that something will be fulfilled at a later time. So keep that in mind. Thanks for joining. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe. It helps. You know, you got to say it because every damn YouTube channel says that. So you know, I don't think I've ever said it. So there you go. Like and subscribe. You know, awesome, great. But yeah, episode 3 is going to go into more of this. Hopefully this is kind of giving you an intro and kind of an understanding of how activities work, got the mind flowing and thinking about it. Thanks for joining. We'll catch you on the next episode. Bye.